Excuse me. Can I quit this podcast?
I told Eddie Murphy to stay in college so he'd have something to fall back on. I did great advice. Jackie, how about the lighter side of history? The lighter side.
I'm not done laughing at my joke.
Okay. I know a lot of things and I share them on the podcast and you don't care.
What are we talking about?
I can't get a word in edgewise on this show. I mean, it's...
Here's how we sell it.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm always so excited to do these. We have a whole laundry list of things we want to get to. What would you like to start with? I would like to tell you a silly tale of when I was a kid, just to give people an idea where I came from. Tiny town, and they had just put in a development, and so my friends in school, a bunch of them lived there. And it never dawned on me that I lived in this old shack and they lived in brand new houses. And I had no exposure to anything. And I was at my friend Ozzy's one day and he was literally a 1-minute walk into the development. And we were playing careers or something. And he says, "Do you want to eat over?" Now my mother wouldn't have cared if I got hit by a truck. And he said, "Would you like to eat over?" And I said, "I'm not sure." I said, "You know what, I got to go to the bathroom." I went down the hall and snuck into the kitchen to see what they were having. And I opened, there's a true story, I opened the oven and it was liver and onions. And I came back and said, "You know what, I got to ask my mother." Meanwhile, she could have cared less. But instead of faking a phone call, I literally called. I dialed my mother and said, "Ma, can I eat over Ozzy's?" And she said, "What are you talking about?" "Of course." "Come on, Ma." What the heck? What are you talking about? I said, "Okay, I'll be home soon." I hung up and said, "I got to go home."
I understand completely. I mean, you couldn't have
Completely faked the phone call in 3rd grade instead of sitting there with his parents and going, ugh,
And we should tell everybody, let's give credit to the small town, East Norwich.
East Norwich.
And I grew up in Locust Valley, which some people listening might think, Locust Valley, Lockjaw, everybody's rich there. I grew up on a normal suburban street in Locust Valley, surrounded by that.
Tell me about it. People say you're from East Norwich on the North Shore of Long Island. Wow. My grandfather, not my great-great-great, my grandfather was a blacksmith. His blacksmith shop was on the corner of our property because somebody had to put shoes on the horses for the rich people,
When I think of summer on Long Island, I think of what we used to do to the kid, the one lucky rich kid who had the in-ground pool. We used to show up at his house 9 in the morning, bathing suits on, flippers on our feet, snorkels. We'd actually say to him, "Hey man, what do you feel like doing?" And I remember, your dogs could run loose back in those days.
We
had a milkman.
Yeah, well, I knew all my friends' parents. Like, we called them by their first name. There was Audrey and Harriet, and my Aunt Janet was Janet. It was like ridiculously rural, but you don't know that growing up. You know that in retrospect. It was unbelievable. Yeah, milkman, and we had there was a guy who used to come around. Not Dunkin' Donuts. What was it called?
The Good Humor Man.
No, but the guy that came around with the cakes and Dugan. The Dugan guy came, and they would come to the door with a big tray with all the different stuff. And what do you want? Because it was a running gag in 10th and 11th grade. I'd be on the couch making out with my girlfriend, and my mother would go, "Oh, Dugan's here! Dugan's here!" Oh God!
I tell you, I grew up on a street. The name of the street was Wood Lane, a nice name for a street, but it connected with a street that has the best name for a road I've ever heard.
And I agree.
And you know what it is? Skunk's Misery Road.
It's so wonderful, and all I can picture is how many skunks got killed on that, unless somebody just made it up kidding around. you know.
And Jackie, this actually happened. I was having a catch with a friend on his lawn, and his was the last house on the street. I missed the ball. It rolled across Skunks Misery Road into tall grass. I went running after the ball, found the ball, looked over, and there was an unconscious body. I'm not kidding. There was an unconscious body.
Skunk body or people
no,
body?
People body. We called the police. The police came. The guy was alive. He was apparently dumped there. And this is Locust Valley.
This is the wealthiest section of the world.
This is where they have Locust Valley Lockjaw, which I think most people would recognize as Thurston Howell on Gilligan's Island.
Right.
I can't, the very, very tight jaw.
The snobby people thought that they were uptight. You know.
But I heard people who actually talk like that. I mean, that's for
Oh,
real.
well, I was a busboy at Pipe and Rock Country Club for 4 years. They gave their phone number in 4 digits. It was
that's
assumed
funny.
it was 676. Oh, what's your phone number? 4892. Oh, good. You know.
And back in those days, we had letters at the front of our phone numbers. OR6 7823. I
Right,
just
that's
gave out my
676,
home
right.
number that doesn't exist anymore.
I was Oyster Bay 6, and then we became Walnut 2. It went from
Wow.
Oyster Bay 6, whatever that was, to 922, which is...
And I remember when all we had was the telegraph. No, I'm exaggerating there. I never had to learn Morse
Steph
code.
Moore.
Yeah.
So great.
Growing up on Long Island was just so much fun and so terrific. And going to the boys club and playing Little League.
You know, when we started Little League in the 50s, not we, when they started, it really was the beginning of Little League anywhere. Like we used to be in the corner of the schoolyard and play, and at one point the fathers came down and they wanted to do the pitching, and we're like, no, we got this handled, you know, and they took over, and then all of a sudden they formed Little League and got the uniforms, and then the best kids got, the first year I didn't get to play because I wasn't good enough. This is crap. I always got to play, you know.
Well, I got to tell you, back in our day growing up in the 60s and playing Little League, your parents didn't automatically go to every game. Now the parents go to every single game and they get emotionally involved and they're trying to live through their children.
I went to see my nephew's game when he was playing, I think it was Syosset Little League, and the coach got in a fist fight with the umpire. I'm like, what? I mean, literally a fist fight. And I with my sister, I was like, is this normal?
Yeah, but maybe the umpire was squeezing them a little bit. You know,
You
the
never know.
strike zone was too small.
Maybe,
if that happened, that's America, and that's insane.
Maybe he's looking for a $20 bill.
I'll tell you what my father did once. He did come to a game, and I let a ball go through my legs, and we lost the game. And my father stood up in the middle of the bleachers, and he yelled out, "Hey, you were adopted."
Oh, you're such a
He's
jerk.
taking it too seriously.
My friend JR always told a story, and I know it's not true, but it could be true, but I was pitching, and my father was the coach. And he was a pitcher in high school. You know, he was an alcoholic, so he actually pitched a no-hit game at Oyster Bay High School. So my story was that my father pitched a no-hit game in high school, and he's been celebrating ever since. That's how he described it. But I'm pitching, and he's saying, do this, do that, and JR swears that I turned and threw the ball at my father and said, pitch it your own damn self. Now, I don't think that's true, but you know, you never know.
Now, Jackie, when I started out in comedy at the Comic Strip in Manhattan, we had a team in the Broadway Show League. And yes, there were Broadway shows that had teams, but then show business institutions, Actors Studio had a team.
Yeah,
And
I
we
was
play-
always so jealous of that, you know.
And we played Actors Studio, and you're there, you're warming up for 10 minutes, and you look over at their third baseman who's got a hat on and sunglasses, and you go, hey, that's Al Pacino. Al Pacino's playing third base.
That's just so fun.
And do you know that I pitched against Meatloaf? Meatloaf had a team. And I pitched, it was me pitching against him, and I'm sure he's long forgotten, but I will remember for the rest of my life that we lost 4-3 to Meatloaf. And he had his band and the roadies there, these were seriously good teams. Jerry Seinfeld was the strippers, we were called. Jerry Seinfeld, Mark Schiff, Larry Miller, Paul Reiser, Joe Bolster. We had so much fun in the Broadway show.
I knew about that, and I was always so jealous. I didn't play in any of those leagues till billions of years later, like 15 years ago or something like that, and I was on the Friars Club team, and it was, I think I was the only one of any note at all, and I just remember getting up and hitting the ball and running for first, and I mean running, and then looking down, and I hadn't gone anywhere. I was like, oh my God, you know.
One of the guys we played against had an artificial leg, but was able to move and actually play the game and run the bases.
This better have a good punch.
Oh, it has a great punchline. Because there's a very funny comedian named Ron Richards, and Jerry Seinfeld was there, and we all laughed at this. Ron goes, look at that guy on first base. He has an artificial leg. If he unscrews the artificial leg and leaves it on first, can he take a really big lead?
That's so great.
We all laughed.
That's so
We all laughed. And you never knew who was watching a Broadway show league game. I went chasing a foul ball. It bounced on the bleachers, and it bounced right into a woman's lap. And she caught it. And I was running up the bleachers to get the ball, and she handed it to me, and I looked at her face. That girl, Marla Thomas. Marlo Thomas, how wonderful.
I hope
She was just, nobody
never
knows
threw
her.
away that ball.
I don't. I should have kept that ball.
You know, Ron Richards was so funny, and he actually used to produce shows around Jersey, and he got a couple too many, so he actually handed off Mustache Pete's to me and Freddie's. These were just bars in the middle of New Jersey before there were really comedy clubs.
And I'll tell you what they paid if you did a gig there. $40 and a cheeseburger if the cook has time.
Right. and I booked the show, so I made a few extra dollars because I had the amplifier and stuff. I remember one week I didn't go, so the guys went without me, and they came back and they said, Jackie, the guy didn't pay us. And I called the guy, and what was his? I forget. I should know his name. And I said, you didn't pay the guys? He says, oh, you know, I meant to pay the guys. I'm sorry, I'll mail it to you. And the next week, he calls me up in a panic. He says, it's Tuesday night. There's nobody here. I said, you never sent me the money. He says, oh, I forgot. I said, I forgot to send the comedians. True story. And from then on, he was
no problem,
up
right?
and up. And
oh, that's
But the
great.
worst, I don't know if this is probably not politically correct, but I don't really care. The funniest joke that Ron Richard had, he said, the other night I came out of the Improv, and there was an Asian gang, a bunch of little kids, like 10, 11, 12-year-old little Chinese kids. But they were a gang, and they came at me, and they all had knives. And I was so freaked out, and they attacked me, but I got away. And the next day, my back pain went away. Which was just so smart. Just so ridiculous.
And that's totally believable. The original improvisation, 44th and 9th in Manhattan, not a nice area.
Hell's Kitchen, when it was really Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, Hell's Kitchen is really gentrified now, to some extent. But back then it was.
I know. I lived
Hell's
on 56 and 8th, and they said, you know, you couldn't have walked out your building and turned right 10 years ago. You know.
Right.
I gotta tell. I don't think I probably told this to you a million times, but we grew up, and I wound up living in Bayville, right on Long Island Sound, which is the garden spot of the world. And this is years and years and years ago, and I was so depressed. But, you know, we're next to Cold Spring Harbor. I tell everybody Billy Joel lives 2 miles and 12 tax brackets away from me. That's it. And I'm freaking out. And Burford said, my friend Burford says, how could you be depressed? You're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male living on the North Shore of Long Island, the Gold Coast of the world. You live better than 99.99% of the world's population. How can you be depressed? And I said, because the other 0.001% are my neighbors. Everybody else was way richer.
Billy Joel, you knew him. You did a benefit, and I was on the show in the stands in Bayville to save a bridge or something? Was it,
No,
what was it?
no,
What-
they
what was
wanted
that?
they wanted to widen Shore Road.
Okay.
And which is the road along Oyster Bay, and if they widened it, it would have just destroyed everything. And the point was they thought it was dangerous. I said, if you straighten it out, people are going to go faster. It was insane. But with Nancy and my ex-wife,
Nancy,
my wife
yeah,
at the
and-
time, her and a very wealthy airline pilot, fought that whole fight, and we did that benefit. And Billy said, at the end, we did an auction. Or we auctioned off something, and somebody goes, $100. And then look over, and
Billy Joel.
with his
Yeah.
$100
And
bill.
he drove his motorcycle there, I remember, and did not have an accident.
No, no, not that night. And it was the only time I ever actually got drunk with him. The waitresses were running the beers, and great time.
Oh, boy. Bayville, growing up, well, your home turf is Oyster Bay, East Norwich, Oyster Bay, Bayville. I went to Locust Valley Schools. Bayville was part
It's
of
all
it.
right there.
Bayville doesn't change. It's like Brigadoon. It appears every 100 years, and it's the same. And I really get homesick or just nostalgic for the past when I drive through Bayville. That's where I did that. That's where I did that. That's where I could drink at 16. At age
Souvlaki is
16.
still there, you know.
You know, the souvlaki place with the stand out on the, they don't have it anymore, but they used to have a counter right out to the sidewalk, and my friend had the apartment above. And we used to lower a bucket on a rope with our order and the money, and they would put the gyros in, and then we'd just bring them up. Oh,
we still eat there every 3 or 4 days. I just love that.
it's absolutely terrific.
You know, I go through all this old stuff, and I found the first flyer that Chris Bates ever made for our band, and it was for the Lobster House, which became Sands, which is now the Shipwreck Inn, right there in Bayville, and it was like 30-cent beers. I mean, you can't believe this flyer, and it's done with press type. Remember press type? And
Yeah.
it's horrible. So and they had a big lobster. It was called the Lobster House, and there was a big tank of lobsters, and I put that up, and my friend Hank says, "Do you remember the fake fight?" And what happened was all our friends came to the gig, and they had a big fake fight, and in all the confusion, they stole all the lobsters. And then went to my friend JR's, and we're still playing, and they cooked the lobsters. There was a tank, and all of a sudden it was like locusts, like wow, and the lobsters were gone.
Hey, if you're watching or listening, this is why we love the North Shore of Long Island. And we remember our childhood, we miss it, and that's why it's so much
And
fun.
people weren't cutting each other with knives and shooting each other. They were stealing lobsters and laughing.
Right. Oh, man, let's do more of this stuff on our next show. What do you say?
I'm in.
Hey, a new episode of Stand Up Memories every Wednesday.
How exciting is that?
Starring me, Peter Bales, and right here, Jackie the Joke Man Martling.
Please follow us on social media. Search it out. What is it? MeSpace?
MySpace,
Your space?
TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Doodah, doodah.